Uh, Today, I would like to welcome you back to lectures on POS412, the government and politics of Nigeria. So, in our last class, we discussed the background analysis of Nigerian government and politics. Don't forget, we talk about the amalgamation of Nigeria, the both Southern Protectorate and Northern Protectorate, how they were merged, and the method through which British colonial authority used to administer the country, even though Nigerian was assumed to be amalgamated, but they were being administered or governed separately through different means of administrations. Then we talk about the adoption of indirect rule in the northern part of the country due to the centralized indigenous system of government, which make it suitable for indirect rule to operate effectively. And we talk about the same approach which was also adopted in the western part, though partially successful, but there are a lot of crises surrounding the adoption of indirect rule in the West, due to the fact that the traditional ruler or traditional institutions they were not enjoy absolute power due to some reason that even the traditional ruler they don't have that supreme authority. They consult with the council of Oba or the kingmaker, even the oracle, which must provide a way to go. So that create a bit of challenges for indirect rule to be fully successful in the western region, in the western part. And in the north, where there were no strict traditional institutions or a non-governing body of indigenous political system that oversee the affair of the entire region. So indirect rule was totally a futile effort there. It failed woefully. The reason why the British authority under Lord Lugard eventually start appointing the warrant chief, through which is trying to administer the region as at then. So today we are going to continue on that part. We are going to center our discussion on three key issues. The first is we want to look at the concept of Nigerian nation. The concept of Nigerian nations. How do we come by this name? And what are the challenges posed? And how are they fair to the point of departure of colonial authority? Then we also talk about, we are going to discuss the unifying actions of amalgamations. Was it that effective? Were British able to manage the so-called country being amalgamated as effectively? And was there any challenges that was carried over to the post-colonial era? We are going to look at that. Then the last issue we are going to look at is the political culture in Nigeria. The political culture in Nigeria. So, historically, Nigeria was coined by a British woman named Flora Shaw, who happened to be the girlfriend of the then Governor General of Nigeria, in person of Sir Frederick Lugard, popularly known as Lord Lugard. They eventually got married. She was actually the one that came up with the idea or the name that is now known as Nigeria, and that also goes a long way to tell you how the foundation of Nigeria was laid, and the meaningless or the expected result we are hoping to see in the nearest future. So there are two key things that actually there are two key things during the amalgamations that laid the foundation for all the pathologies that we are experiencing in the modern day Nigerian political system, because those issues were not actually addressed by British authority before Nigeria, both northern and southern protectorate were forcefully joined together, because there was no concrete consensus or agreement among the people of the two protectorate whether to live together and under what condition they want to come together under one single nations. And the two problems that were actually prominent then and is still manifesting up to today, they are the artificiality nature of Nigerian state, artificiality of Nigerian boundaries, the artificiality of Nigerian boundary, because the British were only interested in develop a better way to administer, to manage their newly found colony in order to minimize cost, in order to maximize their gain. So most of the boundary being merged together or being separated created a lot of problem. They did not follow the indigenous boundary route on toward such political entity can be mapped out as a political zone. So along the line, some community who enjoy socio-cultural common socio-cultural background in terms of language, belief system, and so on and so forth were separated, while some who have very distinct, no initial communications or interaction, not to talk of cultural values and orientation, they did not share those things in common, were forced to under one geopolitical entity. This created a lot of problem then, and up to today still creating problem. That is when that is where you see places like Okun community in Kogi State being grouped as member or as a state under the northern region, while you also see a state like Benue, a state like Benue State being grouped to be part of the north instead of them being merged with the eastern region, while Okun should be grouped toward Ekiti in the western region. And similarly, the Kwara State, which is majorly dominated by the Yoruba speaking people, are also being grouped as part of the north. All these are creating acrimony and a lot of crisis in terms of identity and allegiance, which is currently affecting Nigerian state. Then we also talk about sharp cultural differences. What we have left as Nigerian state now, what we have in common is the symbolic entity in terms of our coat of arms, the flag, and so forth. That's what we can point at as something that joins all of us together. Apart from that, our orientation, disposition to life, our cultural values, our belief system is almost totally different. And all these things are what make a human their human identity. That is what make human to become human. The moment those things were muddled up or taken away from them, then there's bound to be crisis. And that is why most of the crises we are facing now is always emanating from religion crisis, ethnic crisis, and so on. All these centrifugal forces, that will not actually make any nation grow. Those are the things we are contending with now. Because why should a country be considering a candidate for a particular political position based on its religion background or ethnicity? It doesn't really make sense. And that is telling us that if we don't get it right at this stage, Nigeria is going nowhere in terms of development and peaceful coexistence. So the reason why, in our last lectures, I said majority of indigenous Nigerian people are still referring to Nigerian state as British creation. Some will call it Obodo Oyibo. Don't get it wrong. When you hear Obodo Oyibo in Igbo language, you are not actually talking about American Europe. They were referring Nigeria as artificial creations, is British creation, which is created for the purpose of British colony and British benefit. Nigeria initially was not created to benefit indigenous people. Nigeria was created for the benefit, for economy and political benefit of the British power. So let us move away from there and also look at the unified actions of amalgamation. Unified action of amalgamation. The amalgamation of both Northern and Southern Territory in 1949 was effected by Lord Lugard, and primarily for administrative efficiency and effectiveness, because Nigeria happened to be the largest, especially in West Africa, if not in Africa, colony of the British power. So administration was a huge political entity, posed enormous challenges in terms of finance, staff, manpower, and so on and so forth. So they have to devise a way. Even though the two protectorates were merged, they were still unable to govern them as a one entity. And that's also part of the problem you're having now, because that also in its own created disunity. Why in the north, where there were existence of strong traditional institutions, where the emirate, their traditional ruler, they enjoy centralized or total authority over their given territory. So indirect rule was introduced as a way through which British will be ruling through the powerful traditional rulers or authority, while the British only supervise and advise, and at the same time setting agenda or policy for the traditional institution to follow. To a great extent in the north, as we said earlier, because northern part, they enjoy centralized, the traditional institution enjoy centralized authority over their given territory. That indirect rule was hugely successful, and the same indirect rule was introduced in the western part, because it is believed Yoruba also have some strong traditional institutions and traditional ruler in form of Oba. But when the British try to enforce indirect rule, they realize that it was not going to be easy, because the traditional institution then were also under the supervisions of some council, like in Oyo Kingdom, Oyo Kingdom. They also have councils of Obas, or traditional council, or in a case kingsmaker. And aside that, the traditional ruler does not enjoy supreme authority, because he must also consult the oracle for directions and decision to be taken over a certain issues. So that also creates a lot of problem, which hinder the success of indirect rule in the western region. So that is why they say indirect rule was partially successful. We cannot say it was a total failure. But in the in the eastern region, where there were no strict traditional institutions that oversee the general affair of that territory, it becomes difficult to introduce indirect rule. So in a way, the British authority redefined their policy. That's why in the western region and in eastern region, they started introducing direct rule, appointing warrant chiefs and so on and so forth for different purposes. So in a nutshell, when you are talking about indirect rule, you are actually talking about a system through which British authority were ruling through the existing traditional institutions, which they assume enjoy supreme authority over their given territory, in which they only provide perform supervisory role and rendering advices in terms of policy formulations and setting agendas. So what are the features of indirect rule? Because it's also important when you are talking about indirect rule, you might really want to know the features or key element of indirect rule. Ruling, number one, is ruling through the traditional institutions. The British to be ruled or were ruling through the existing traditional institutions. Taxations, that is the key, that is the most important thing. The whole essence of indirect rule or direct rule is for British authority to amass wealth, to collect tax, and taking it to metropolitan Europe in British to further develop their territory. You also talk about application of indigenous law. In some cases where it's very difficult to bypass the indigenous law and rules, so it was imperative for British to adopt some of these indigenous law and order into how the system is going to govern and relate with indigenous people, especially in the north and some extent in the west. But when it comes to the issues of taxation, there was a crisis in some parts of the country, especially when they started placing tax on women. That is when there was Abba crisis and several other crises around the country then. So we also talk about preservation of religion and to some extent cultural value. British authorities also take into cognizance note that the religion is very key, which must not be taken away. The belief system is key to human existence, and their cultural value is also very important. So they also try to preserve some of these cultural values and religion practices. So and in 1954, we are talking about the analysis of Nigerian political system. The background analysis of Nigeria. So then we'll be talking about how Nigeria evolved from pre-colonial administration to colonial administration and to the post-colonial administration, the modern day Nigerian political system. So in 1954, the federal system of government was adopted, and that was what led to the creations of Western, Eastern, and Northern region. And these three regions were largely dominated by single ethnic group. In the Northern region, Hausa Fulani dominated over all other smaller tribes like Tiv, Efik, and the like. Why also in the Western region, the Yoruba ethnic group dominated other smaller group like Edo and so on and so forth. Similarly, in the Eastern region, which was largely dominated by Igbo over other smaller ethnic group like Ijaw, Ishekiri, and so on and so forth. So that is to tell you that even from the foundation, from the onset of Nigeria as a state, there were problems unresolved, which is meant to pose a huge challenges in the nearest future. And the nearest future is what we are witnessing now. So attempt to reverse all these things is also creating more problems. We shall see as we move on. So in 1960, the leader from three regions unanimously agreed to pursue independence, and they later achieved that in October 1st, 1960. Why in 1963 Nigeria became a republican? The Nigeria became republic in 1960 under Tafawa Balewa and Nnamdi Azikiwe. Tafawa Balewa happened to be the prime minister, while Nnamdi was ceremonial head of the government, the president. So in January, also before we get there, in 1965, even before 1965, in 1962, there were problems started brewing his head due to elections that saw to the emergence of the prime minister and the president as at then. So, and the coalition party being formed also created a lot of problem, because the smaller group within a particular the smaller political party within a particular region is enjoying enormous influence, is wielding enormous influence over the party that enjoy majority support, because that particular party that is that's wielding a lot of influence is enjoy federal backing, and that is crazy. That created a lot of problems at then, and that problem was carried over to 1965 when the result election that they conducted then was rejected, because they felt the election were hugely rigged, and that led to a huge crisis, which eventually give an opportunity to the military, to the soldier boys as at then, to stage a coup led by Major Kaduna Isiogu. That coup, although they gave different reasons, that the power, the civilian administration, they were abusing their power, embezzling money, mismanaging the economy of the country, and so on and so forth, which led to the first coup in January 15, 1966, which led to the death of many political figures, including the prime minister himself and the Sir Akintola, who happened to be the major opposition in the Western region. So a lot of political leaders were killed, and as a result of that, the northern elite, particularly in the military, felt the coup was primarily designed to exterminate the northern leaders from the political game in Nigeria. So, which was the singular factor that led to the counter coup that happened in July that same year, 1960, that brought in General Yakubu Gowon, even though he was not the most senior military officer then, because there were other senior military officers that ought to have taken over, but because some of these senior military officers were not from the north, and the northern felt that coup that brought in General Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi was just to exterminate the northern leader. So they don't want to trust another person from other region to be in that position. So the Gowon military government ruled from 1966 to 1966 to 1976. 1976. Is that correct? I think he ruled. Yakubu Gowon ruled for 8 years, when his government was also toppled by another military coup, counter-military coup, which led to the emergence of General Murtala Muhammad. So General Murtala Muhammad was also assassinated in a failed coup carried out by Major Dimka, and that also led to the emergence of his second in command, General Olusegun Obasanjo. And General Olusegun Obasanjo ruled from 1976 to 1979, when the democratic election was conducted, and that led to the emergence of Alhaji Shehu Shagari Muhammad. And that election was also considered a fraud by the major opposition party led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. So Shagari ruled from 1979 to 1983, when he seek re-elections, and he also won. That election was also contested based on this two-third majority, which was considered as a fraud in order to favor the ruling party. So the crisis also led to the coup that unseated the Shagari administrations in 1985. That coup saw to the emergence of General Muhammadu Buhari. So General Muhammadu Buhari also was unseated by a counter coup led by General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida in 1985, when he was when he went to Saudi to observe small Hajj that Muslims used to perform. So General Ibrahim Babangida also ruled till 1993, when he eventually conducted a democratic election, which that election saw to the emergence of Chief M.K.O. Abiola of SDP emerging victorious. But that election was also annulled by the military head of state under General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, and that led to a serious uproar and national crisis that almost brought Nigeria down as at then. So, due to enormous protests from home and abroad and the intervention of the international community, the pressure forced General Babangida to step aside and appointed the national interim government led by Chief Ernest Shonekan. So Ernest Shonekan government was also toppled after a few months by General Sani Abacha. And Sani Abacha government succeeded till 1998, when eventually died as a result of different unconfirmed source, that some say he had poison apple, Some said it was killed by female sex worker, and so on and so forth. But that also led to the emergence of General Abu Salam Abubakar in 1998. And Abubakar ruled till 1999, when he eventually conducted the election that ushered in Fourth Republic in May 1999. So that's sort of the emergence of democratically elected government under Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, a former military head of state. So it's why we are telling all this story is for us to appreciate how far Nigeria has gone and how far Nigeria has evolved and transformed. And one key lesson that we appreciate you to learn from all this historical overview is to understand the level of inconsistency in terms of governance. And one thing that is a recurring decimal, that has been a recurring decimal in all this historical overview we have been talking about: coup, counter-coup, failed Third Republic due to corruption and all that, is that the inconsistency, or what we can call irregularity, to sustain a particular government for a period of specified period of time was actually affecting the growth and development of the nations. So Nigeria, as at that time, could not pursue a clear-cut agenda, governmental agenda, which we can be sure it won't be truncated. If government A set an agenda, developmental agenda for the country in terms of education, or in terms of economy, in terms of agriculture, and so on and so forth, there is no assurance that that government will be there to execute all its program. When another government it come up with its own new idea entirely. All these things were actually retarding the progress of Nigeria to move ahead in terms of development and democratic consolidations. I think I would like to stop here. Maybe in our next class, by God's grace, we wrap up the lectures by discussing the political culture in Nigeria. Thank you and all the best.